All right, everybody, welcome back. It's the end of the world with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
I'm Stu, and today we are talking about James Cameron's 1984 early masterpiece, The Terminator. But before we get into that, we thought we would talk about another recent technologically related incident of doom. Specifically, the walkie-talkie pager explosions that rocked Lebanon, allegedly targeting only members of Hezbollah, the terrorist organization that is also a part of the Lebanese government. And the initial attack seems to have killed around 28 to 40 people. The number is fluctuating. And I saw a number that was 2,600 people injured in the attack.
Wow.
Which seems like a lot. And, people are saying this is an act of what is generally called terrorism. Even former CIA head Leon Panetta was quoted as calling it an act of terror.
Generally and specifically, these exact types of acts would be described as terrorist acts.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And
of course, people who died and were injured were obviously not just Hezbollah, even if that was justified, which, that's a whole nother conversation. But, there were obviously, as tragically usual in these cases, men, women, civilians, women, children, also in the
killed in the
those who no longer are with us because of this disaster. And of course, they then somehow used their own actions to then justify a further escalation, which I think they actually did say that they were attempting to de-escalate through escalation, was something I saw.
We've reached true 1984. I mean, the 1984 comparison is, of course, extremely overused, but that's an example of newspeak that just feels ripped directly from the text of that.
That's right. Yeah.
Of that oversighted novel.
But it is it's truly, speaking of overused terms, it is this true step into the dystopian, right? I mean, because of course it's not, even if it was just pagers that were somehow known to be affiliated with Hezbollah, again, don't know if that justifies this in any particular way, given the collateral damage that was known to have been a part of this whole operation. It's also just consumer products. They seem to be able to do this. And people in Lebanon are scared that, anything, a coffee maker could blow up.
Iran has had the Revolutionary Guards throw away all of their communication devices.
Yeah.
Just for fear that something like this will be targeting them next. And understandable. But
and of course, like there's something just incredibly horrifically ironic about making this claim that they're so sophisticated, right? This is part of the language that was rolled out to accompany this. I remember listening to the Daily about this earlier in the week, and I believe they described it as an audacious effort on the part of the
Israelis. What they say, audentes fortuna juvat, fortune favors the bold, right?
Yes, that's right. I mean, it's this every time that these actions are described, when it comes down to something that the Israelis are doing, it's always this language of sophistication, right?
Innovation.
Yeah, and on the one hand,
dare we call it disruption?
Right. Right. It seems somewhat strange, right, to claim that you have this ability to so specifically target, let's say, militants with this type of attack, but you've also just spent the last year indiscriminately bombing an entire group of people. Sort of hard to square that circle, I think.
Yeah, it's troubling, and of course, after a single Hezbollah rocket struck near Haifa or Tel Aviv, today Israel killed 400 people in a massive bombing
Yeah.
campaign across all of southern Lebanon. And yes, pretty horrific stuff.
Hmm.
And but luckily, the Biden and Harris camps are working 24/7 towards a ceasefire,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I mean,
that
that much is clear.
and this will clearly be accomplished by doing nothing
Yeah.
to condition aid or condition military arsenal expansion or anything of that sort that you might think would be a card that they could play if they really.
Right. And also, like, again, not to trivialize it at all with some hypothetical future, but it really does sort of speak to. I mean, if this is something that authority and institutions are capable of, writ large, then well, boy, this is
Well, and
a
keep
sort
in
of
mind that if they're being quote unquote terrorists or terrorist adjacent justifies this,
yeah.
recall that the Israeli government has labeled the protesters at places like Columbia and City
Mhm.
College to be essentially no different than terrorists.
That's right. Yeah.
So are they going to be targeted next? It feels like this is really an escalation is the only
Yeah.
word for it. And yeah, hopefully there's some more positive news from the region soon. Although signs point to
The exact opposite of that.
yeah, which is dire and grim. And eventually, we're going to have to do an episode about sort of biblical prophecy and how
Mhm.
this sort of motivates certain parties that are involved in spurring on the Israelis to be as unrestrained as possible in their aggressive military actions. But that is not what we have on the docket for today. Instead, we are turning to something a little bit more pleasant and fun, namely
Mhm.
the Terminator. Uh, I love the Terminator. It's the breakout role, even more than Conan, for Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This was the thing where he really blew up to superstardom. Initially, I read he didn't even want to do it. He was like, this is just some silly B movie. I guess it's different than my normal barbarian swordsman roles.
Right.
But and then when he started seeing the dailies after they'd begun shooting, he was like, "Oh, this could be something very special." Like he got it.
Oh,
He's
really?
yeah, he got it. Like early on, he realized, "Oh, actually, this is good." And like to his credit, he spent months working on like weapons handling and like getting the sort of vibe of his role down. So
Because
uh,
my big takeaway for Arnold in the movie is just that his actual speaking voice is so perfect to play this exact role, right? At this time when,
yeah,
1984, um, his command of the language and his accent combined to just make this perfect simplicity that it feels like such a dream spot for him at that moment, right?
yeah, and it's almost like they hadn't quite the Cyberdyne or Skynet hadn't quite gotten the accent emulation exactly to a human level. Although he does, perfectly emulate other people's voices at different times. So
Sure,
it's a
right.
little weird, but you know, yeah, I agree. I think it's perfectly fitting the his whole. I mean, he's perfect. This is like the role that he was born to play. This is
Mhm.
like exactly why he was put on Earth. So it's of course the breakout film for director James Cameron, one of the masters of our cinematic world, having released I think three of the top four highest grossing films ever. Uh, the two Avatars and Titanic are still riding high. And he started from this place that's much more, it's basically a B movie, and it's only
Yeah.
his talents and some of the performances that kind of
Right.
elevate.
This was like a blockbuster budget, right?
No, I think it was $6 million, something
Yeah.
quite small. Not nothing for the time, but it went on to gross several $100 million, and obviously begat
Paved the way.
the biggest sequel of all time, probably
Yeah,
Terminator 2, Judgment Day, which we will be tackling on a
for
few.
sure.
I
And I
mean,
actually like it. I like T2 better.
yeah, I don't know. I'm of two minds, like a tree in which there are two blackbirds. And as I like to say, T2 may be better, Michael, but the waterfall begins with the first drop. I haven't said that in a while. I want to bring that back for the old heads. So the movie was written by James Cameron and Gale Ann Hurd, who was a producer. He claimed that she actually contributed very little to the script, and of course they were, I think, married at some point. Like a lot of Cameron's biggest movies, he is either married to another producer or
Oh, really?
co-star. Yeah, because he, after T2, he and Linda Hamilton ended up getting married, and I think there was another. I mean, he was married to Catherine Bigelow,
Mhm.
another accomplished director before Hamilton. So I feel like he has this weird. His personal life is always kind of interweaving with the projects that he's working on. No judgment. I just think it's kind of interesting. So the film starts out in the dystopian future of 2029, which is
Yeah, it's so scary to imagine. Such
yeah.
a distant future.
Yeah, a time unimaginably far from our
I mean,
present
just
moment.
getting that information really sort of sunk me from like, those things like today, I was today years old or whatever,
Yeah.
like a moment of real aging where it's like, I watched this obviously when I was a kid and just to see the future catch up, you know,
Well, it's
to a
like,
point where like, because you don't think of it as like a pure B old timey camp sci-fi at all.
mm,
And then you just see like they did this happened in like 40 years from now, and I was like, that's now.
well, I mean, we're already almost 10 years past the future to which Marty McFly travels in Back to the Future
Yeah,
Part
sure,
2. And
sure.
I mean, we did Parable of the Sower earlier this year, which
But
is
again,
set
like
in
the
2024.
the Marty McFly thing is like a send up kind of, right, whereas this is like a dystopian future that happens in a few months from now, right?
Yeah. The basic plot of the movie, I'm sure familiar to many people, is in the future, there's a war between man and machine. Skynet, this sophisticated AI system that was for some reason given full control over the national defense systems of America and presumably its NATO allies, obtained self.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that sounds so ridiculous. I mean, who knows? Trump gets back in, Musk works his magic. All of a sudden, all the AI guys are in charge of this stuff. Who knows?
Grok initiates
Yeah,
World War
yeah, that's right.
III. Skynet, upon achieving what is referred to as self-awareness, right? It becomes aware of
Mhm.
itself as a being, a self-conscious being separate from the human beings that it rules, and immediately starts seeing all humans as an enemy, as a threat, therefore initiates a nuclear war with the hope of wiping out as many humans as possible. But good news, fails. Some humans survive, and initially
Mhm.
they're kind of some are kept alive to work as slaves. Why is unclear, but
Yeah.
eventually a leader emerges, John Connor, and he's the one that turns the tide. Skynet is on the run. The humans are on the verge of taking back their now skull-covered wasteland planet, ruled over by tank treads and
It's still home, though, Stu. It still matters.
um, time travel is a very old conceit. It goes back to at least the 19th century. There was a French novel about a clock that you could turn the handles back and move back in time. Time travel obviously appears in the famous movie slash book, The Time Machine. But I think Time Machine is one of the first ones where time travel forward happens. This movie in specific reminded me of a couple things. One was the X-Men story Days of Future Past, which is set in a similarly grim future dystopia, and a character has to travel back to prevent a political assassination that will lead to this. And mission accomplished. Kitty Pryde saves the day. Thank God.
Sure.
That was just a couple years before this. I don't know that Cameron was aware of it. I mean, Cameron's a visual artist. It wouldn't surprise me if he has some relationship with comics, and it's one of the most celebrated comic stories of all time. Another antecedent is, of course, the Ray Bradbury story, A Sound of Thunder from 1952. Did you ever have to read that in school growing up?
No.
It's a great story. It's about a hunter. Time travel's become normalized, but you have to be very careful. So people go back to hunt dinosaurs, but they select dinosaurs that they know are already going to die at specific moments, so that the hunters killing them won't cause any, ripples in the time stream. But during this hunt, a guy gets a little nervous. He steps off the magic levitating track, and you know, unbeknownst to him, he crushes a butterfly. And when they go back to their future, everything has changed. Spelling has become phonetic. The fascist party has just been elected when right before they left, the fascist party had lost. So it's not the actual origin, but people associate it with the origin of the butterfly effect.
Right.
This is like a time version of the butterfly effect, where a slight change to a seemingly, insignificant creature in the ancient past could have far-reaching ramifications across the whole future.
Right. So what is the actual idea then? It's that if is obviously that if Sarah doesn't have the child, John, then John doesn't exist in the future.
And so Skynet wins, yeah.
So they've just discovered that it all hinged on this one guy. It's classic great man stuff going on.
Oh yeah, but it's very much going back in time and killing baby Hitler, right? I mean, that's the modern. But
also just that like it's so like hyper focused on this one person, right? The idea that like nothing else would have changed, right? It's just
but there wouldn't have been some other rebel leader who rose up or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And also, as we know, it is in fact because they send the Terminator back that John Connor exists in the first place, right?
Yes.
Because without them sending that, then the Resistance wouldn't send Kyle Reese back. You'd never meet Sarah Connor. And John Connor the whole time knows that Kyle Reese will fall in love with his mother, right? Because we see the scenes in the future when Kyle Reese is looking at the photo of her and like, oh, isn't she pretty? And like, so there's a lot of time loop stuff in this. I don't want to get too causality loops. I don't want to get too caught up in it because who cares? Apparently Cameron had a dream that resonates very much with the origin story of Frankenstein. This is also essentially a Frankenstein story, right?
Yes.
Mary Shelley, I think we talked about it in our 5th episode, had a nightmare that the being was reaching its hand towards her in like a kind of needy desperation. And that was the sort of image that inspired her entire novel. Similarly, Cameron apparently was sick with food poisoning in Italy on the set of Piranha 2, which is a sort of hack, low-budget film that he directed. That was his first picture. And he drew he's a great visual artist. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Cameron's like really good pen and ink, really does beautiful sketches.
Interesting.
And you remember in Titanic, there's the scene when Jack is drawing Rose. And it's like really Cameron did the drawing that Leo is shown.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's Cameron's actually the artist, not Leo.
But he just like sat in front of a nude Kate Winslet and drew her.
Yeah, it was a struggle for him. He had to prepare for weeks.
No, trust me. I'm actually really good at this.
Actually, can we do one more day of this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he ended up sketching what became the sort of endoskeleton, the metal skeleton with the glowing eye, inspired by this dream. And when he made the film a couple years later, he was going over with the effects guy who was going to make the models or whatever, and they ended up just like going right, like the Terminator we see in the film when it loses its human covering is like directly based on Cameron's initial drawing, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And, it's a Frankenstein story of like technology turning against its creator, although the physical Terminator is not that. The being of Skynet, whose sort of character, if you can describe an AI defense system as having a character, it's greatly expanded in the second film, which, as I said, we'll talk about later. The Terminator himself owes a lot to John Carpenter, specifically Halloween, right? He has that kind of relentless Michael Myers, he cannot be stopped. He has
Yeah.
one goal. He's just going to reach it no matter what. He also kind of
It's just gonna go down that phone book.
Yep. It's quite amazing. And Sarah Connor, of course, and this is the Jamie Lee Curtis figure, who's just trying to get away from this relentless madman. Although in this film, the Terminator has a bit more of a motivation, right? In that it's attempting to prevent the destruction of its creator, Skynet,
Right.
in the future, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really like, I mean, many people have said this, but it's like a slasher horror film with sort of technological instead of supernatural elements. Um, and when did you first see this? Do you have any memories of your earliest exposure to this movie?
I actually saw this. What year did Terminator 2 come out?
I think 91.
I think I saw Terminator 2 first, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly. Um, and I saw that, I think, not, I don't, definitely not when it came out, because I
sure.
was like
Probably when it was on video.
8, right? But I guess Terminator 2 was obviously gigantic.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it first and not really, and being like, wait, what, the origin story was a little bit confusing. So then I ended up watching the first one. But I think the order definitely played favorites for me. I never really had the same romantic association with the Terminator that I did with the second one.
Fair. I mean,
Like I thought it was okay, but like, they obviously got way more money to make the second one.
yeah.
I was a kid, it looked so much cooler, and I was like, what was so good about this first one,
Yeah, no, I think that's understandable. I think that's a common experience for people born in the early 80s, as we were.
Yeah.
I think slightly older heads might have had a appreciation of the original film as a kind of elevated B movie, right? Something that
Right.
could have been total schlock, but was actually,
I sort of had the same thing with Indiana Jones.
really
My love of the series is
Last
Last
Crusade.
Crusade.
Okay.
And then I watched Temple of Doom before Last Crusade, but then I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark last.
Oh, interesting.
Struck me as less impressive. Granted, I was hardly looking at things too critically back then, but Last Crusade is always the one that stuck with me.
Sure, and I think if you're looking at those films too critically, they're all pretty silly.
I'm not going to have you say a bad thing about Last Crusade, but yeah. Anyway.
No, I like all. I had Temple of Doom on VHS for some reason when I was 10, and probably have seen that movie 100 times. Maybe not 100, but many times. In any case, so the movie opens with dystopian world. A lot of miniatures in this movie, miniatures combined with wide shots. I mean, it's really, really well made picture.
Yeah.
Just like blending of different effects, different styles, a lot of rear screen projection that you don't quite notice. And it looks great for such a low budget film. It opens with this with this crawl, sort of in like a dystopian font as synth music plays. The machines rose from the ashes of the nuclear fire. Their war to exterminate mankind had raged for decades, but the final battle would not be fought in the future. It would be fought here, in our present, tonight. Which is great. Brad Fiedel is the composer. He does the score for the second movie, too. He's worked with Cameron on a bunch of things. Perfect tone setter for the movie. And, throughout the film, there's a lot of comparisons between the futuristic tank tread, destructive, terminating machines, the hunter killers, as I believe they're called, and the machinery of the present day, right? So we cut directly from the tank treads rolling over a field of skulls to a garbage truck, like lifting a dumpster. And I think there's a lot of subtle play, with this. It's not that deep particularly, but it's just well done. You're like, oh, I get it. Watching it with a little bit more of a critical eye this time.
Right, like when they cut to the first group of like ne'er-do-wells, and they're looking through the Griffith Observatory.
Yeah.
It runs throughout the movie. I mean, there's some funny moments too, like when one of the car chases, when somehow there's just so little traffic in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's quite late at night, but yeah.
I mean, I don't care how late it is. You're not pulling off a highway like that.
Well,
There's
they're originally going to shoot it in Toronto, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but then Arnold had to do reshoots for Conan the Destroyer. So the whole
Sure.
production had to be pushed back 9 months or something, and they were able to film in LA. Yeah, the Griffith Observatory, obviously famous for Rebel Without a Cause.
Mhm.
And, these are the James Deans of the present. These sort of
Yeah.
Bill Paxton, Mohawk, spiky haired, kind of like that. Um, of course, Arnold appears nude. Famously, you can only flesh can travel back in time, which seems like, well, but isn't the Terminator a robot? Yes, but it's covered in living flesh. There's even
Living tissue.
a living tissue. Exactly. They anticipate our objection.
It's like, I guess that gets you through airport security.
Yeah. Excuse me, sir. We're going to need to do a pat down. Your whole corpse is seeming to be made of metal. And, then we see after he appears, he beats up the punks and steals their, garb. We cut to, and we cut to Kyle Reese appearing, who is the human counterpart, played by Michael Biehn. Another Cameron stalwart. He also appears in Aliens and a couple other movies. Still acting, still appearing in TV. Never rose to the levels of superstardom of Arnold Schwarzenegger. But then again, few have. And then there's an opening sequence where, Reese is like sneaking away from cops in a mall. He steals a gun from them. He steals some clothes from the mall. All like very well done and entertaining. And we kind of have no idea what's going on. And then we just cut to like Sarah Connor, Linda Hamilton, riding along on her moped. Right? She's a waitress at some kind of...
She's late for work. She's not great at her job, if you can believe it.
Yeah, she's in some kind of big boy style eatery, and the customers aren't having it. Their orders are wrong. She's spilling stuff on people, and the Terminator.
She could be more insignificant if she tried.
Yeah,
right?
it's beautiful.
Awesome. She can't get a date on a Friday night.
Yeah,
nothing's going.
Yeah, her date cancels on her, and her roommate and her pervert boyfriend are, they're going to have a great time, but she's like, I'm just going to go out to the movies, on her own.
Yeah. It's also like, that's a funny bit too. Ginger, right?
Ginger. Yeah.
Her only thing is that she's always listening to her Walkman.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
like
again,
funny. I think it's also very funny, like technological comment, right? It's like the sort of like the way that people are becoming more and more dependent and like blinding their perception based on like the technology that's available in 1984. It all felt kind of connected to where
absolutely
he takes the technology in the future. And of course it also provides like a plot point, right? Because she listens to it so much that even when
her boyfriend is being murdered by the Terminator,
she can't hear a thing. It's like, I don't know if you ever listened to those Walkman. Those were not like noise canceling headphones.
No,
like,
no, they were not.
You're going to hear a body smashing into glass.
Yeah, and I think another great little detail is Sarah calls, he appears and he's going to kill Ginger after initially the Terminator, just goes through the phone book and gets the addresses of all the Sarah Connors and is just going to knock them all off to be safe, right? Presumably Skynet knew Sarah Connor lived in Los Angeles, but didn't know her middle initial, her...
Well, it's also strange because like one wonders what I guess like the rebels, the humans, like what did they know? Because when he comes back, when Reese comes back, he asks a cop what year it is, right? So he's trying to make sure that he's landed in the right moment. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. But I think he has more information than Skynet because John Connor has provided him with that. And they realize that
like
they somehow
experimental time travel.
Yeah, I think these are the first people / cyborg to
ever it worked. They both ended up in the exact same moment.
Yeah. Yeah, perhaps unlikely. This gets expanded in some of the later films, the lore explained.
Sure, but that's what's great, I think, about this first one. One of the things I really love is like it's on the one hand, it's this huge sci-fi story, right? Development of AI, complete collapse of humanity, this battle to save themselves, time travel is possible. but everything really, they don't stretch it out. It just
Yeah,
happens
yeah.
overnight. They just bang out this battle. It's mano a mano, and may the best man or cyborg win, right?
Yeah, no, well said. Yeah, I too was really impressed by how much of the lore that will be the basis for the sequel and then the many lesser sequels is already present in this film, but as you say, not drilled into your head, not like
That's right.
you're not beaten over the head with it, which I think is great. Arnold, I love when Arnold's at the gun shop prior to his
Oh,
killing spree, and he's
so
talking.
good.
And Dick Miller is the Dick Miller also he's in everything, but he's also the neighbor in Gremlins. Like this is
Mhm.
really vintage, and he's like Terminator's like, yeah, fist, plasma rifle, right? And he's like, buddy, I've only got what you see.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Take it or leave it, man. Take the Uzi or leave it.
right. And of course he takes it all and murders the murders Dick Miller, R.I.P. But yeah, Sarah Connor doxxed by the phone book, right? This is you know, in this era when doxing is like, oh my god, his address was posted on stream.
Yeah,
What a
yeah.
crap! It's like, well, everyone's address used to just be in a big book. You could find it a phone book,
Yeah, so what
phone
happened to
booth.
that? Because that is doxing now. Is that are there phone books? Like,
No, not really. I mean, some
yeah,
people choose to have their numbers listed, but most people do not. And also, you know, most of us don't have landlines. We just have our cell phones, right?
sure.
But yeah, it is just
When did the phone book go away?
probably, I'm going to say 2006. I mean, I don't really
I think it
know.
was like iPhone after the iPhone, basically.
2008. Yeah, 2007, 2008. You know, I'm sure that Yellow Pages is hanging on in some form or another somewhere, right?
Right,
But yeah, it's pretty much gone the way of the toll booth collector.
right. BlackBerry, Kodak, the phone book.
The cops also. Oh, another thing I was going to say is that, you know, when Ginger, Sarah realizes that, you know, Sarah Connors are being murdered, so she calls
Mhm.
Ginger to warn her, and Ginger has that thing on the answering machine where she's like, "Hey, it's Ginger. You ever?"
Yeah,
Just kidding. You're talking to a machine. You know,
great
it's
line.
just another little moment of like, subtle, you know, small thing. Also, she goes to a nightclub when she's worried she's being followed. She knows that she's being followed. Sarah knows that she's being followed by Kyle Reese. She
Mhm.
snips in. She slips into a nightclub called Tech. What is it? Tech Noir, right? And again, you know, you have this just throughout the movie. There are all these little things, and we also get a bunch of flash forwards to the technological war in the future, which feels very Vietnam coded to me, right?
Mhm.
It's like Kyle Reese is remembering being with his buddy, and like they're blowing up a thing, they're shooting a grenade at it, and then his buddy gets blown up by the robot, and he's like, "Oh
Right,
man, my buddy's dead." You know, it's just like early '80s. I think Vietnam's still very much in the cultural mix,
for
right? This is
sure.
the era of the Deer Hunter. Platoon, I think, is '85, right? So or '86 even. So it's very much in the air. I love that she has a pet iguana for some reason. Very Patty and
Yeah,
Selma
what is
going
that?
on.
Is that just to build her quirk and her
Yeah, I
relative
think
weight?
it's just
Yeah.
to give her something to care about, right? Kyle Reese rescues her in the Techno Club as the Terminator has finally tracked her down. Great sequence with
I love that. The cops like, just stay in the nightclub, you'll be fine. We're sending
we have a
you.
unit coming out to you.
Right, this Terminator fella had just like walked into a gun store and blown away the owner with no regard, but you'll be
and
fine in this
and
nightclub.
and
Don't go to the
murdered
bathroom though.
yeah, and murdered a bunch of other Sarah's Connor, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's right.
yeah. She reluctantly goes with Kyle Reese and almost, you know, immediately like starts to like him, right? I mean, one
Mhm.
thing you could say is that the love story in this is the most contrived story imaginable. Like Kyle Reese has literally been sent back by his son who
Mhm.
knows that he knows that this is all how it's meant to be.
Yeah,
John Connor figures
that's
this
right.
out in the future.
Well, John Connor's a great man.
He's a genius. He's
Yeah,
Napoleon for the
yeah.
war against the machines.
And it's also very vague, like how he taught them to deal with these
We
machines.
get no. Yeah, we
He
have.
just knew how to dust them, man. He just knew.
We get none of his strategy, right? We don't get it. We don't get a peep under the
Right, but
hood
then
of
again,
the.
like to me, it's like part of what works is it's just like a chase movie with this very heavy backstory that doesn't really get dug into too much.
Yeah, and there's a moment where Kyle Reese is like, "This is only one possible future,"
Yeah.
which also throws like, well, so wait, there are multiple possible futures
Well, even
here.
when they first get together and he like gets her in the car and he just starts like explaining the
And
backstory.
she's trying to jump out of the car. She's like, "What?"
Well, I mean, what else would you do? It's like this guy's just telling you like these weird like time travel mechanics and stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
it's amazing.
that's my favorite. I think my favorite sequence of the whole movie is when they end up at the cop station
Yeah.
and they bring in the like the profiler, the psychologist,
Oh, who's in all? He's in the first three movies. He returns in two,
and
and
he's
he's in
just so
three.
sure of himself.
By
It's
three, he is completely destroyed, having seen all these
right. And
Terminators.
he even like pauses. This
He's like,
guy's like,
get a load of this.
get a load of this loon.
Yeah. Dr. Silberman, right? He's a recurring character in the franchise. Silberman doesn't believe anything Reese has to say. They get arrested after escaping this initial chase with the Terminator. And the Terminator, classic Michael Myers thing, they go to the car where the Terminator's crashed in. Oh, he's gone.
Hmm.
Then we have that long sequence where he's like repairing himself. He plucks out his unnecessary human eye, and that's
Doing his makeup, as it were.
yeah, a lot of that is like one thing I love also is that the Terminator really breaks down in this movie. Like he's as the film goes on, Arnold starts to like look puffy and like paint is peeling off, is you know. And there's the use of the Terminator head puppet, especially in that eye repair suit. That's a puppet. Looks a little bit janky, but you know, it's such a low budget movie. It looks amazing for the time.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. And yeah, as I said, like all of the Terminator lore is really put in place in this film. And, you know, there's a couple flash forwards to these time a Terminator infiltrated the base and just had a gun and was massacring people, and Reese managed to stop it. And there's a charming scene when they're in that motel hiding out and they're planning to go to Sarah's mother's house or whatever, her cabin. And Kyle Reese is teaching her how to make plastic explosive pipe bombs.
The first like step in her education, right?
Yeah, which she'll then teach John Connor to do, and I love how in this film she moves from being an utter nobody, insignificant waitress character to hardened rebel, right? Like it's really
yeah. She has like the great '80s line that I love in this, where she's like, "Me save the world," you know. I can't even balance my checkbook. And
yeah.
like, what was that? What was balancing a checkbook?
Oh, what was
like,
it?
What was the process?
Basically, you just kept track of all your deductions and all the checks you sent out and all the.
Just, I mean, no offense to these people like living in the 70s, 80s. It doesn't sound that complicated.
It's not. I used to do it when I first got
but
a
wasn't
checkbook.
it like it's said in so many movies at the time or TV shows at the time, like, oh yeah, you can't. How do I?
I think it was like a staple of like home ec class. Like this is something that everyone has to learn, so it became a kind of trope or something. Yeah, you're right. It does come up very, very often. After their fun night of making pipe bombs, they naturally enough fall in love. And as I was saying,
what could get you hornier?
Yeah,
right?
Even though this is an incredibly contrived love story, Kyle Reese has been sent back from the future by her son, who knows. You know, I still found it kind of moving. You know, I was like, you know,
yeah. Although I felt like the directive for the sex scene was like, make it look like the baby is getting made now, you know, like all of the like intense looks, and he's so deep and she's so into it, and their hands are being held so tight at the moment of ejaculation. It's like, by the way, this is the time, this is the moment, the kid is being born right now.
Yeah,
you know?
okay.
It felt, you know, and maybe this was purposeful, but like it didn't feel sensual or even sexual. It felt almost mechanical. In the way that, like, you know, they're grasping hands,
yeah,
right, and
Yeah.
it just felt like sort of slowed down, and it just really meant to hammer home to everyone, like, do you know that guy John Connors we've been talking about? He's being conceived right now, if you were wondering.
Yeah, and it's the scene when she calls her mom to be like, we're at a motel in wherever, and the Terminator's like, just get here as soon as you can, honey. Like, it has a voice emulator. Somehow,
Yeah.
presumably it met her mom, memorized her voice, then murdered her.
Yeah,
Right.
the mom. Yeah.
Right. And then that comes back in the second film with the famous T-1000 and John Connor's foster parents moment. So, right, there's the great chase. Kyle is throwing the pipe bombs at Terminator, finally on his iconic motorcycle, chasing them through the, again, relatively traffic-free LA streets. And they get to where else but a factory of the Terminator's skin is completely, its human cover is completely blown. It's just full metallic skeleton mode, and it chases them into this factory where its ancestors are, working about, right? Which I love. Again, it just the full circleness of the sort of machinery.
Yeah, I like the idea of thinking about the movie through the lens of the Terminator being the one worthy of sympathy, right? Because he's also trying to save his.
Well, he's truly a fish out of water, right? I mean,
right. He doesn't know.
They don't even.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
they don't have plasma rifles, but yeah, he's also attempting to save his species.
That's
in
right.
The future.
That's right.
That's a good point.
And like, you're sort of drawn to that a little more because he's in cyborg form. There's something about like the original Terminator, I think, because it was sort of lower budget, that like I found it very hard to think of Arnold strictly as a villain when I was rewatching the movie this time.
Yeah.
It's complicated, they both want to stick around.
It's complicated. The famous obfuscation used by media personnel to not take sides in struggles throughout history and the present, shall we say. So Reese is shot. He's dying. He manages to like blow the Terminator apart, but at what cost? His life. Mm-hmm. He's dead. His life. R.I.P. But the Terminator.
This is why his John Connor doesn't know his father.
Right, because he got killed by the Terminator just after he was conceived.
He knew him before, but he no longer.
Well, he knows him in the future when he's young. When he's younger than
that's right.
John Connor. Right, like it's great. And the final sequence where the upper torso of the Terminator is still just like, must kill Sarah Connor, right? It's just like crawling.
He's about to choke her, right?
And then she gets him into one of his robot brethren sort of press that
like
just
a compactor.
Yeah, right? Kind of, and of course the arm is famously left, which will come back in the second film. And yeah, that's it. It's a tight movie. It's not very long.
And then the ending, she's like...
The ending, I love the ending so much.
She's in a Jeep, right?
She's in a Jeep. She's got a headband on. We can just tell she's in...
Gas is only 40 cents a liter.
They're in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
And the kid takes the Polaroid that will be eventually given to Kyle.
She haggles?
Yeah, he wants $5 for a Polaroid.
Like, just give.
But I mean, $5. That's like $20 now. It's a little steep for a Polaroid. But so I respect her haggling. But
you do? Yeah, I know.
I admire it.
I feel like if I've been through as much as Sarah Connor, I'm like not sweating the dollar at this point.
Yeah, probably not. But I do like that it just comes full circle. And I just love that whole sequence in Mexico because, like...
Yeah, it's like there's a storm coming.
Yeah, the old man's like, there's a storm coming. She's like, is there ever? And,
So do you know if he... Was the plan a sequel the whole time? Was it like, if this hits, then we'll...
I don't think so. I think
that's interesting because it really did... I mean, it is... To me, it's one of the great sequels of all time.
Oh, yeah.
And also, like you said, I mean, it seems to have laid the groundwork to a point where surely there was some intention to keep telling.
All right. One thing I do know is that in the original script for this film also had the liquid metal T-1000 in it. there were 2 Terminators sent back.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but Cameron decided that the technology was not in place to make that feasible. So
Like to make it look good on screen?
that's right.
Okay.
Certainly not with the money that they had available. And
Sure.
so I think he kind of had that idea held back. So probably once this became such an enormous hit, he was then like, all right, so. And I think in the sequel originally, the Terminator that was sent back, the liquid metal Terminator, was going to look like Kyle Reese. It was going to be played by Michael Biehn.
Oh, really?
But that would have just been too confusing, right? So it's like the same 2 guys, except the roles are reversed now, and one's a liquid metal. It's just, and plus the what's his name, Patrick, who plays the Terminator 2. It's one of the great cinematic roles of.
No, really, yeah.
Also,
we'll have to do that.
Also great in The Sopranos as David Scatino, the wayward friend of Tony Soprano.
I don't remember that.
It's the 2nd season. He's the gambling addict friend. Anyway, great actor. He's in a lot of good stuff. So yeah, it's the Terminator. I love it. How relevant it is to our current worries about AI. I don't know, but it certainly is inspiring a lot of the worries about AI, right?
Yes.
That's what everyone has in the back of their mind when they're like, what if this gets out of control?
What if it decides that we are all the problem?
So, I mean, in a way, I would say this film is as influential as Frankenstein as far as like the anxieties about technology and the idea of technology turning against its creator. And, in that way, I think it's a worthy inheritor of Frankenstein, unlike many of the other sort of Frankenstein adjacent projects, of which there are too many to list. So many. So, yeah, it's the Terminator. I mean, great movie. Love talking about it. Any final thoughts from you, Michael?
No, but I am very excited about next week, which I believe we are taking on another movie that I weirdly have saw like you said 100 times. You said about Temple of Doom. I think I saw Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman roughly 100 times growing up, and I could not be more excited. Obviously, pretty relevant with everything that's happened over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I haven't. This is one I haven't revisited since COVID struck.
I watched it during COVID.
And we were friends when the Ebola scare happened in New York too, right?
Yeah.
I had a couple close calls with that. I don't know if I've ever told you. I'll keep that powder dry for our episode next week.
That's a good tease for next week.
But I had a good near miss with that Ebola outbreak.
Okay, great. Let's get into it.
Good. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It'll be fun. And who knows what horrible events in the world will have happened between now and then for us to discuss. But we will do them in good time. Remember, if you love the show or hate the show, please subscribe. Please tell a friend about this terrible show. You don't want them to listen. You want them to. They have to hear it. It's so aggravating. But no, seriously, you can follow us on Instagram at The End of the World WMS, and we're posting pretty regularly on there about the episodes, some images relevant to each week's topic. And until the Outbreak episode drops, this has been The End of the World with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and we'll talk to you real soon.